Why, hello there, friends. How are you guys doing? I hope you're having a lovely Sunday. Oh, hi, guys. We have some people here. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Carrie. Oh, we'll catch you later, Christy. I hope everyone's been having a lovely weekend. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you can hear me all right. I have all the tea accoutrements here, so we can make some tea, and we also are going to chat about A City of Bells by Elizabeth Goudge. We've been doing a read-along for that on my Discord group, which has been so much fun. Ooh, Carrie has a new blend. You'll have to tell us, yeah, whoever is having tea as well right now, make sure you let us know in the live chat what blend you're having. I have my Albion blend tea from Fortnum and Mason. It says 4 extraordinary tea times there. So I'm going to be having this one. I thought before we got into the book chat, we would make tea together. And I thought I'd show you how I like to make tea, my kind of tea ritual. But obviously, everyone has their own tea ritual. If you just put water in the microwave for 60 seconds and put in a tea bag, that makes wonderful tea as well. You don't need all the accoutrements, but I kind of like to make a little ritual of it. It's really fun. I like to use an electric kettle. I don't know if you can see there's a little bit of steam coming out. I did just already boil my water. I tend to think that tea made with freshly boiled water tastes better than tea from the microwave. I don't know if that's just, just me, or if it's actually true. When I boil tea in the microwave, for 60 seconds, and then I put the tea bag in, I often get this like weird film over the top of the water, which doesn't seem to happen with actual freshly boiled water. I feel like there was a tea tin I once had that said something about how, you had to make it with freshly drawn boiled water. What does this say? The Fortnum and Mason tea tin says that we should heat water to 100 degrees Celsius. I do not have a temperature, so I'm not that scientific. Use 1 teaspoon of tea per person and brew for 3 to 5 minutes. Albion blend is best served with milk. So that's their Fortnum and Mason way. I do like to use the freshly drawn water. I like to use my electric kettle. And so I have this lovely teapot. Today we're using our loose leaf tea. So I do have in this teapot, it's very convenient. It has a little tea strainer built right into it. This is always really nice because then the tea won't get too steeped. You can take it out once it's been in there a little while. When it comes to measurements, I kind of like to eye it. See, I feel like there's an element of alchemy to tea making, like where, you try to get it just the right color brown and then just the right amount of milk. And everybody has their own preference. So I don't measure it too precisely. I know some people say you should put like in an extra teaspoon of tea for the pot. I don't usually do that. I just go with I'll probably, see, that's 1 teaspoon. I might put in, this is a 2, I think it's at least a 2-cup pot. So I'll probably I usually do about just a little less than 2 teaspoons. So we put in our tea. Oh, hi, Elizabeth. Oh, clotted cream. That sounds so good. Hi, Talisha. Hi, Angie. Oh, it's so fun to see everybody here. Oh, I was tempted to make Victoria sponge. I did not end up, I have a couple tea treats here, but I did not end up baking anything. I meant to, like scones, or I'd really like to make either a full-size Victoria sponge. They always look so beautiful in photos. Or I think it'd be fun to make some mini Victoria sponges because those look even cuter. I'm pretty sure I've seen them on the Great British Bake Off or somewhere like that. Okay, so I usually do warm the pot, especially if you have a teapot you really like a really maybe expensive one or a nice one. This one wasn't expensive, but I just have always gotten into the habit of you just pour in a little bit of hot water and then kind of swish it around. So that way, the teapot isn't shocked by a full kind of, filling of hot water all at once. I think in Downton Abbey, there's one scene where they're making tea, and I think they have this elaborate tea kettle on like a little open fire, and I think she has a separate bowl where Lady Grantham or whoever it is pours the water from warming the pot. Today I'm just gonna leave that water in there because the teapot was fine. But you can, you know, pour out the water you used to warm the pot. So that should be good now. We put in our tea leaves. We're gonna put in our nice hot water. Fill it up to the top. There we go. Now, sometimes I'm impatient. Like the whole how long do you let it steep thing. I like to enjoy my tea over a long course of time. And like it's like as soon as I've made it, I want to pour a cup. So I'm not too precise for how long I let it steep for. If I have a like in this case, I can't stir it because it's in the basket. But if it's just a tea bag, or if I just put loose tea in a pot, then I will just stir it because I feel like that helps it steep a little faster. And then it's like I can have one preliminary cup, and then, you know, after I've finished that, you know, like 3, 4, or 5 minutes later, then I pour another cup. And then what I actually like to do, usually I have a tea cozy. That's the one tea implement we're missing today, is a little tea cozy to go over top of the pot, because it extends the life of the tea so much longer. Like it really insulates the pot and keeps the tea hot for so long. But the problem is, especially if you like leave the leaves in, over like 10, 20 minutes, the tea is going to become very, very strong. So what I do is after 10, 20 minutes, you know, maybe I've had 2 or 3 cups, and probably it's getting kind of low anyway, I will put in more hot water and like give it a little bit longer to steep, and then drink it again. I think this comes from, I lived in Ireland for a year. I studied abroad, and I had an Irish roommate, and she would leave her tea bags on the table for like maybe a week and just reuse them time after time. And there was an ad in Dublin where it was like literally a clothesline, and there were tea bags clipped to it. And I think it was for a bank or something. And it was like, you're thrifty reusing your tea bags, so, you know, invest in our bank or whatever. So yeah, I feel like that's my mindset, is to use my tea bags or my tea leaves as many times as possible. So it's like, if once I've had a couple cups, I'll just put in some more hot water. Why not? It takes longer to steep after you've steeped it the initial time, but you get more out of it. Oh, look at everybody here. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Anna. Hi, Nikki. So fun to see everybody here. When you have old teapots or teapots that are valuable, it is always like a little scary getting them out. But I love using teapots so much. I feel like that's half the fun. Like, you know, having tea from the microwave is good too, but just having the teapot there on the table is a fun part of the ritual. Yes. Valerian herbal tea. That sounds good. Yes. So, has it been long enough? See, I didn't do a timer. I do like to just kind of eye it. You know, you feel like you're a witch concocting a potion. You know, just putting in all the right amount of cream, the right amount of tea leaves. I think I'll give it just another minute. I do have a little, this is from Harrods, a little tea rest here. So like if you had a tea bag, you could put your tea bag on it. Once this is steeped, we can take out our tea strainer. And I do like to have a napkin. I feel like so many teapots dribble. Even when it's like a really nice, high quality, expensive teapot, you pour it and it dribbles and you're like, why? So if any of you guys have teapots that reliably never dribble, let me know. This one actually isn't too bad, but especially if you have a nice tablecloth. Today, my tablecloth in my in one of my videos, I was mentioning how I was going to get new fabric for more curtains. So this is my Rifle Paper Company fabric that is destined to be a curtain, but today we're just using it as a tablecloth. So we can't afford to dribble any tea today. So I can show you my my tea snacks while we wait for it to steep. I have some little speculoos because I feel like there are certain biscuits that when you dip them in tea, it's like the best experience. If you just ate it, it wouldn't be nearly as good. And then these things, they were from France. It was such a funny little container here. Fine crêpe dentelle de Bretagne. It's in French, so maybe fine crêpe dentelle de Bretagne. And they reminded me of these little cookies that we had in Switzerland. Look at this. It's like, oh, it's already falling apart. So it is like a really, really thin, dry. It's not, you know, like soft like a crepe. It's hard, but it looks pretty good. In Switzerland, we had this thing called a caprice cookie, and it was like a very, very thin, crunchy cookie, but like really rolled up tightly into a sort of cylinder. And Athos loved them, and we only bought one package, and he wanted to buy another, and I think we talked him out of it, and like he's still kind of sore about it. We didn't think we would love the caprices that much, but when he tried them, he absolutely loved them. I tried to get him some for Christmas, but they had them on Amazon, but it was being shipped from some Chinese company. It was like $50. I was like, this probably isn't. The caprices aren't worth that much, but these should be fun to try. They're already kind of falling apart. All right, so let's pour our tea. I have my napkin here to put under the spout. Oh, I filled it very full, so it is kind of coming out there. So then we put in as much milk as you like. I think I once saw this poster that was like the different shades of tea, and they named each one like depending on how much milk you like to put in. Of course, it's called, what is it? It's called Miffy if you like to put the milk in first, and Tiffy if you like to put the tea in first. I like to put the tea in first because then I can really control, you know, did I put in too much milk? Do I want a little more? I use half and half on special occasions and 2% most of the time, because I feel like the half and half is just a little bit too rich. The 2% is a good impression. I don't know if you guys can see that. The tea always looks so beautiful when it first kind of swirls into the tea there. Yes. August Folly by Angela Thirkell. So there's tea that is stewed. It's so fun reading British books, and when they like comment on how the tea is. Like there are a couple of times in A City of Bells, we hear that Jocelyn, the main character, there's the lady from the sweet shop comes over and like cooks his dinner, you know, it's kind of his part-time housekeeper, and makes him tea, and he always forgets about his dinner, and so by the time he gets to the tea, it's like really stewed. It's very, very strong, but it's like in some situations it's okay to have strong tea, I feel like in books, whereas in other situations it's like if the people in the house can't make good tea, that does not say good things about their character. I haven't read an Angela Thirkell for too long. I really enjoy Angela Thirkell. I can't remember if I've read August Folly or not. Oh, good evening from Manchester. Hello. Oh, so fun to see everybody here. Okay, so I think we're ready. It's probably still a little too hot. The cream probably didn't cool it down quite enough, but that's always like the most refreshing sip of tea is like just a little, you know, maybe slurpy sip of tea that's a little too hot, but it's always so refreshing. Your first sip. Yeah, we'll let it cool just a little bit more, and maybe we'll try our little Bretagne snack. Does anybody else have any desserts that they're eating with their tea today? Oh, Paris from Harney and Sons. They make very nice tea. Wow, this is like you know, it's empty in the middle. That's really good. All right. So I know some people had a hard time getting A City of Bells. I felt so bad. Elizabeth Goudge is an older author, and Hodder Books re-released these maybe in 2017, and you can still get them on Book Depository, but they have gotten more spotty with their inventory. I got this in November, so I assumed like these copies still weren't too hard to find, but unfortunately in April, the Book Depository didn't have them in stock anymore. So They do have used copies from like ABE Books, but obviously depending on which marketplace seller you're buying from, they might not ship it very quickly. But if you can get a hold, even a used copy, it's definitely worth it. The used copies, people in Discord were posting pictures of their covers, and it's fun to see some of the old covers. This one's very pretty too. I like how we can see Torminster, which is a cathedral city. The cathedral city of my thumbnail is Ely. I haven't been to Wells, which is the inspiration behind Torminster. I read that book, The World of Elizabeth Goudge, which was kind of a biography, and the author had also visited a lot of the spots where Elizabeth Goudge lived or, based her books on. And it was really fun to read about. Elizabeth Goudge was born in Wells and grew up there for the first 10 years of her life. And then she moved to Ely. Her father was a pastor, a fairly well-known one and well-respected, because he ended up working at Oxford. But yeah, first she was in Torminster, then she was in Ely. So Torminster is the inspiration behind, I'm using its fictional name, Wells, then Ely. Wells is Torminster. And we have Henrietta, who is 8 years old. She's fairly young, and so I feel like Henrietta is a little bit of a picture of Elizabeth Goudge herself, and like Henrietta just thrives in Torminster. She just loves the atmosphere and the history and the cobblestones and like the sculptures of saints on the cathedral. And I love the way she writes about there's a sculpture of Mary and baby Jesus on the cathedral, and she always is looking up and hoping that she'll catch the baby laughing, which is so sweet. Henrietta really appreciates the atmosphere of Torminster. And I think Elizabeth Goudge must also have really appreciated the atmosphere of Wells. But yeah, Ely is where the thumbnail picture was taken, and that is the inspiration behind. What is the name of that city? It's in the Dean's Watch. She might not have named that cathedral city. It was another really vividly drawn. I feel like when it came to cathedral cities, Elizabeth Goudge is kind of in a class of her own, bringing them to life and talking about their history. But yeah, I think she might not have even named the one in Dean's Watch, which is kind of funny. Let's see. Oh, Wild Strawberries. That's another. I really love that. That Angela Thirkell. Tea and character, sometimes good and sometimes bad. Yes. Yeah, let's see. I'll have another sip. It's probably a better temperature now. Yes. All right. Yeah, it still is good weather for tea, at least where I am. It's like there are getting to be hotter days, but it's still like fairly cool. So a cup of hot tea is refreshing. Although, to be honest, I drink hot tea into the summer, all year round, really. I'm not big on iced tea, oddly enough. I just have never really gotten into iced tea. When we're at Disney World, what is that brand? White Peak, something like that. They're in like the food courts. They have iced tea, and so it's like I drink that one. But otherwise, it's hot tea is I think is the way to go. So I thought in our live streams we usually just kind of go through the plot from beginning to end. So I haven't given a spoiler warning yet, but we will be talking about the full plot. So if you don't want the book spoiled, you can just kind of mute whatever or head out whenever you feel like we're getting too far into the plot. But Jocelyn is our main character. He's the first one we meet. He's a young man who's just returned from the Boer War, and he injured his leg, so he was kind of invalided out of the army, and now he feels kind of at a loose end. He's not really sure what he's supposed to do with his life. Like, his family wants him to do one thing, he wants to do another. So he ends up going to Torminster, which is where his grandfather and grandmother live. And they have adopted these two, well, they haven't adopted both children. Hugh Anthony is the little boy who lives with them, and he is their actual grandson. Henrietta is from an orphanage. And grandfather, this is probably a good portrait of grandfather's character. He's such an amazing character. I feel like in the Discord chat, everyone was admiring him, and he's very quotable and relatable. Although in some ways not relatable, he's very saintly as well. Like he he'll say that like the Lord guided him, and so he just like goes and does whatever it is, whatever crazy thing it is he feels the Lord has guided him to do. And one of them was that he adopted Henrietta. He was on the board of governors at this orphanage, and every so often they would go and visit. And when he saw Henrietta, he just, like they like connected right away, and he insisted to the matron that I'm adopting her. I'm taking her home right now and getting her out of this drab orphanage and getting her out of here. And he comes home, and grandmother, his wife, is much more practical, but has obviously put up with his moments of being guided by the Lord throughout their entire marriage. And she's just like, oh, we're old, and here we have these 2 kids to raise, and it's so it's fun seeing what grandfather says and what grandfather does. I love the advice he gives to Jocelyn, though. I feel like the description of Jocelyn's kind of mental state at the beginning is very relatable. The way he's not sure where to go. Although in some ways it feels like it's good, even like in these earliest pages, that he has gotten out of the army. Elizabeth Goudge says, hold on, where are we? So at first it took a while to get adjusted to the army, but soon he was climbing the ladder well. The army knew his worth. So well did it know it that the final humiliation of death might have seized upon a portly general so armored with clinking metals and richly colored by red tape that it would have been hard to distinguish him from a boiled lobster. But the fate that controls our destinies had thought otherwise, and a bursting shell had sent Jocelyn home to England again with an incurably lamed leg and a future that consisted of nothing but an immense question mark. What to do with him, his large and impecunious family couldn't imagine. It was the beginning of the 20th century, a moment in the history of the English upper middle class where the things that a gentleman couldn't do far outnumbered the things that he could do. When Jocelyn suggested humbly that he thought he might be a commercial traveler, his father blew down his nose contemptuously. And when he said gently that he'd always thought it would be great fun to be a bookie, his brother Hubert implored him not to be more of a fool than he could help. His proposal that he should keep a hotel was received in chilly silence, and the attractive idea of going around the country with a barrel organ he dared not even express. I love Jocelyn's ideas. But yes, and he ends up just going to Torminster to visit his grandfather and grandmother, which the rest of the family doesn't quite approve of grandfather either, you can imagine. They wanted Jocelyn to go work in somebody's office in Whitehall. He loathed London, and in any case, he was in that state of fatigue of mind and body when all well-meant suggestions immediately make the sufferer want to do the opposite. He was being difficult, and he knew it. So he gets away from his family and goes to stay with grandfather. And grandfather, it seems like, instantly has such a, like healing effect. Like he really understands Jocelyn, and even just pulling into Torminster, it seems like has this healing effect. And it's fun. This book does take you through, actually, I think more than a year. So we get to go through all the seasons, but it starts in spring. Oh, where should we start? Oh, hold on. I can't find the quote. Oh, here we go. It was that moment of spring when the world is pink and blue in the distance and yellow and white close at hand. I love that because that's just what we've been going through. Like the forsythia are the first flowers on the scene, and they're so bright and yellow. You have like the white blossoms, but like the blue sky off in the distance, and like the kind of hazy pink of new red buds on the trees. Blue hills were piled against the sky in shapes more lovely than a man can build, and the woods that lay at their feet and crept up their sides had all flushed rosily at the kiss of spring. The gorse was in riotous bloom, and each green field broke at its edge into a froth of blossoming blackthorn. The primroses were in flower, and the larks were singing. It was a still warm day after rain, and delicious smells came to Jocelyn through the window. The smell of the gorse and the wallflowers in the cottage gardens, the smell of wood smoke and freshly turned earth, and rain-washed grass and fresh beginnings. A pity to be tired of life in such a world, thought Jocelyn. If the old earth could wash herself and begin again so often and so humbly, why could not a man do the same? I just love that quote. Because obviously, you read the news or out in the world these days, there's so many stressful things going on. And, it seems like, who can be happy in a world like this? But then there are other moments like Jocelyn, when you just, go outside and see how lovely it is, like just on a blue sky day, and you're like, well, who dares not be happy in a world like this? I feel like Elizabeth Goudge really gets that balance of, hope and despair, of happy and sad. Like she just kind of writes so beautifully about both sides, like the whole kind of spectrum of human emotion and spiritual struggles. And she's just so lovely. Hot tea anytime. Oh, coffee temperature. I don't drink iced coffee much either, but I definitely go for iced coffee way more than I would go for iced tea. Banana cake with blackcurrant tea. That sounds lovely. Elizabeth Goudge. Yeah, I feel like she's kind of unique amongst authors because I mean, like Jane Austen, who I absolutely adore, and I think in a lot of ways was certainly more talented than Goudge, like in terms of like just sharpening her pen and like narrowing down her plot and her characters. But Jane Austen was a very spiritual person. We know from her letters, like her faith was very important to her. But it's like so subtly there. It's definitely there in Jane Austen too, but it's like very subtle. Elizabeth Goudge, though, talks about it a lot more, what's the word? Explicitly. And I feel like that's difficult to do, to talk about faith in a way that isn't sort of cheesy and cringy. And yet she really does it, I think, just beautifully in all of her books, and definitely in A City of Bells. I think there was one other quote from the beginning I thought it would be fun to read. So the house grandfather lives in is actually based on the house Elizabeth Goudge grew up in. It was where her father lived, and so it was like one of the old, what's the name? Not priory, or was it a priory? One of the old buildings connected to the cathedral where like the canons and the deans would live. And like it had this big stone fence. So you kind of you didn't know what the house behind the fence was going to look like because it was so sort of encased in this armor. And then it had this really cool old tower attached to it, and just very quirky layouts. Like rooms had obviously been added, and unexpected staircases, and poor Jocelyn, places just to stub your toe. But it sounds like just a beautiful, beautiful house. I think Elizabeth Goudge's old houses in England are privately owned, so it's too bad. Wouldn't it be nice if some Elizabeth Goudge fans could get a hold of one of them, and like then you could visit it the way you can visit Chawton or Jane Austen's house. Yeah, so Jocelyn arrives in the house and meets Henrietta and Hugh Anthony. And I really like their conversation. I feel like I've probably read this quote before. When I was in my last April reading vlog, I read some Elizabeth Goudge quotes, and I know I've talked about this in reading vlogs and videos in the past, and I felt like I'm probably repeating myself because I'm probably reading the same quotes out. But they're so good; they're worth reminding yourself of. So the grandfather says to Jocelyn when he's getting moved in, "Have you everything you want?" "Everything but peace of mind," said Jocelyn unexpectedly, and blushed crimson. He remembered of old that grandfather's effect upon him was always to make him say exactly what was in his mind. An embarrassing effect. Such people as grandfather, possessed of a sincerity as catching as measles, shouldn't be allowed about loose in a world where the wearing of a mask was a good form. His grandfather himself does this all the time. He just says exactly what's on his mind, and I don't think it's here, but there's another description of like he's at a meeting with the canons, and he like will just like say how like petty or mean that stupid the argument the other canons are having, but like he doesn't realize he said it out loud, so like he's totally chill, and the other canons are all like but anyway, so they continue. Peace is as essential to mental health, dear boy, as light to human life. What has happened to yours? Mislaid it in South Africa, said Jocelyn bitterly. My work's gone and I don't know what to do. How can a man be peaceful when he has no future? Don't talk nonsense, said grandfather almost sharply. We've all a future. You don't know in what direction yours lies, that's all, and you've not the patience to wait and see which way the wind blows. The wind, asked Jocelyn. Our destiny is like a wind blowing, said grandfather. It carries us along. But now and again the wind seems to drop. We don't know what to do next. Then it may be that a blade of grass growing in the road beside us bends slightly. It is a tiny movement, slight as a whim, but enough to show us which way to take. Jocelyn smiled at grandfather affectionately. If we were all to yield to our whims, he said, we'd do some pretty crazy things. I, for instance, would start a shop in Torminster. So that's foreshadowing there for sure. But yeah, I just love that quote. As for peace, there's plenty of it in this house and in this town. They are so weighted with age that they have, as it were, fallen below the surface of time, like a buried city below the sea. Fall with them. Dear me, I must go and say evensong, or I shall be late for dinner, and that distresses your dear grandmother. It's just so sweet. It reminds me of that song, you've got to drift in the breeze before you learn to sail, or before you set your sails. That's the verse. I can't remember the name of it, though. It's an occupation where the wind prevails. Before you set your sails, you've got to drift in the breeze. Is that the name of it? It might just be Drift in the Breeze. I can't remember the name of the song, but it has really great lyrics, and it's kind of that same idea. Try to write down quotes. I know there are so many quotes that I've copied out from Elizabeth Goudge, and that I like to kind of underline. So many lovely quotes. Yes, this book is brand new, so I have written some. I like to write in my books, so I marked some things in the margin. But I wish I was taking it around with me, and I already have crinkled the cover a little bit. So it's like, oops. Oh well, that means it's well loved, right? That means it's been read, and it's a lovely. It's been appreciated. Yes, so I think Elizabeth Goudge does a great job really getting into the mindset of her characters, because I feel like, we really feel how Jocelyn feels, and we feel how grandfather feels, and we feel how Henrietta feels. So many of the quotes that I underlined, I feel like were from Henrietta, because her way of looking at the world is just so beautiful and so wonderful. Although it's fun how the characters kind of echo each other's thoughts, but kind of from their own perspective. So like from different points of view, but it's really fun. It's almost like there's a conversation going on between their thoughts, even though they didn't explicitly say these ideas to each other. Jocelyn, for example, when he goes to his room, he is imagining the history of the house. Left alone, Jocelyn unpacked slowly, discovering the powdering closet, hardly bigger than a cupboard, where long ago, that reminds me of my closet in my new place, long ago, some hooped and panniered lady had silvered her hair with powder, put a round black patch on her chin, rouge on her cheeks, and rings on her fingers. What a fuss about nothing her toilet must have been. But perhaps she was one of those people who do nothing so nicely that it becomes something. As he arranged his books on the shelf in the closet, he pictured her to himself, slim and golden-haired, clothed in silk that rustled like autumn leaves, tremendously absorbed as she powdered and patched and laced in the creation of beauty. And longer ago still, his room was part of the monastery. Some monk sat here, perhaps, making a missal, painting into it purple pansies and ivory roses and queer little animals with long legs and scarlet tongues, the great-grandfathers of the dragon who pranced on the signboard in the marketplace. And the monk, as he painted a blue sky behind his ivory roses and put golden scrolls around the animal's legs, would have been as absorbed in the making of a beautiful thing as the lady with her rouge pot and her jewel case. And on them both, the winged seraphim would have looked down, and for them both, the time that in torments did not pass away, but only stepped into the background, would have been measured into golden lengths by the chiming of bells. That's just so lovely. And this room, I think that in the house Elizabeth Goudge lived in, they found some seraphim, some angels up around the walls. But these two characters, the lady and the monk, later in the book, Henrietta imagines them, and she kind of senses their presence too. And I just think that's so fun. In A City of Bells is kind of an adult's novel, but Elizabeth Goudge also wrote a lot of novels for children. And there are two other books that follow the lives of these characters and that take place in Torminster, and those are children's books. So, I mean, they're still very enjoyable for adults and like full of lovely, ideas and writing. But they are called Sister of the Angels, which is set at Christmas. And Sister of the Angels, I feel like there's a monk from the past who features in that book. And I feel like it's the same monk that we hear about in this. And that made me think when I was going to read the other book, which is, I can see the title, or I can see the cover of it in my mind. Oh my goodness, how can I not remember it? A City of Bells, Sister of the Angels. Does anyone else remember the name of what is the other one? It'll come to me. The funny thing about Elizabeth Goudge's books is that they did rename quite a few of them. Like Green Dolphin Street is also known as Green Dolphin Country. Henrietta's House, there it is, thank you. I was hoping that Henrietta's House would be about this Victorian lady, because they're both such vividly drawn. I mean, they don't appear much in this story, but just fun to imagine the past inmates of the house. But she sadly did not appear in Henrietta's House. But still, I just think that's such a fun, the way the people from the past are alive in Elizabeth Goudge's novels is so cool. Like the way she describes it there, that time doesn't pass away, it only steps into the background. There's a line in this, speaking of the monks, about how, or actually there's a whole passage about the history of like the person who built the cathedral, and like the kind of folklore is that it was a swineherd, and his herd of pigs were all turned into monks. And so that was the first occupants of his monastery. But later on it mentions that when monks misbehaved, they were walled up. They are buried like between the walls, and that actually, when Elizabeth Goudge was living in Wales, in one of the nearby houses, they discovered a skeleton between the walls. So interesting that she kind of worked that in. I think a lot of the little vignettes in her book like that are, inspired by real characters. Yeah, even if a character is less pleasant, you understand them and sympathize. I think that's really one of her strengths. It's amazing how, she never takes things on a superficial level. She always goes beneath the surface, and it's really like everyone can be redeemed. Everyone has something of worth. Everyone needs to be respected as a fellow human being because they have this spark of divinity in them. And, nothing can really quench that spark except death. Like while you're alive, you still have hope, and you still are valuable and worth it, and your life is, worth it. And I just think that's so beautifully written in here. And even like with something as simple as that, like it's not just the monk writing this scholarly tome who's doing something worthwhile. Even the lady who's, powdering and putting on jewelry and kind of creating a beautiful outfit, she's also in pursuit of beauty, and she's also doing something worthwhile. So I just think that is so much fun. So that little quote about Jocelyn starting the bookshop was foreshadowing. We actually already met the house. This is, I think there's a quote in one of the Anne of Green Gables sequels about when Anne sees a house and like it has so much character and like it just kind of speaks to her. And when Jocelyn sees this house in the marketplace, it has the same effect on him. Like it's a friend who he knows, and that's where he ends up opening his bookshop. And the person who used to live in that house, his name was Gabriel. How would you pronounce that? Ferranti is his last name, so we most of the time hear him referred to as Ferranti. And he was very unhappy, kind of tortured artist. He's a writer, very impecunious, and he ended up running away from town. And grandfather and Henrietta had really befriended him, so they wish they could know what had happened to him. Jocelyn has never met him, but he's moving into the house where this man once lived, and he feels like they have a connection because they're both living in the same house. And like, it's like he can feel the atmosphere created by Ferranti, like his frustration and his despair. And so like, in some ways it's dark, but it's also a mystery that he kind of wants to unravel who Ferranti was, where he went. And there are a few old books of Ferranti's that Jocelyn inherits. And it's Byron, Shelley, isn't it Shelley? It is Shelley, right? And Shakespeare, Hamlet are the three books. Yeah, it is Shelley. And I love the way she incorporates the poetry and like quotes from those authors into the book, because luckily Ferranti did like to mark his books as well, and so he like marked certain passages. So when Jocelyn is reading the book, he really, you know, has certain passages stand out to him. One of them is this poem from Shelley. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. She breaks it up a little bit, but then here's the passage that she remembers. This is Henrietta actually reading Shelley at her lessons. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. So, like we were saying earlier, that, you know, the characters, even though they're not having explicit conversations about certain ideas, like they're both have these thoughts and both encounter these poems. Henrietta happens to read this poem in class, and they have a great tutor. Miss Lavender is her name, and she kind of just lets Henrietta and Hugh Anthony do whatever they want. Like grandfather knows that Miss Lavender is in hard straits, and he wants to be able to pay her, you know, employ her. So he employs her as the governess, even though she's not super qualified. But she lets them do what they like. Hugh Anthony has a very scientific mind, so he's always interested in science. And Henrietta loves poetry, so she asks to look at the poetry book and stumbles across this one. But later, Jocelyn, reading the volume of Shelley that Ferranti left behind, comes across that exact same paragraph about, it's marked in Ferranti's book about drive my dead thoughts over the universe, like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. It kind of reminds me in, is it Ayn Rand? I'm not sure how you pronounce her first name. But it must have been Atlas Shrugged. There was this one quote that was, one of the characters was saying he'd scattered so many sparks to start so many fires, and who could give him now the spark he needed. But I just like that idea of scattering the spark someone else needs, even if, you know, in this case Ferranti's not present and they're not sure if he might be dead. But Jocelyn obviously senses there's this spark from Ferranti that he's meant to kind of help flame into a fire, and he hasn't even found it yet, though. So Jocelyn and Henrietta and grandfather, we've met a lot of the main characters, but one of them who we haven't met is Felicity Summers. She is an actress, but her aunt lives in town, and they run into her. She actually also is attracted to this old house where Jocelyn is going to open the bookshop, and she breaks in and is looking around, so we hear a lot about her. I love how she and Jocelyn have such a sweet romance that just kind of develops slowly. And actually, they inspired the Tea Party because Felicity invites them over to tea. And Jocelyn, who as a rule loathes tea parties, accepted with alacrity. There's this great description, though, of what tea parties mean to the residents of Torminster. Wednesday came, and Jocelyn and the children once more sallied forth, watched from the front door by grandfather and grandmother, and from an upper window by Sarah and Ellen. In the placid life of Torminster, tea parties were of importance. They lay on the surface of existence like the markings of hours on a clock face, measuring the slow movement of time. Events were remembered in relation to tea parties. It was the day I went to the Archdeacon's in my blue silk, a Torminster lady would have said, if asked when her cook gave notice. Or, we made 12 pounds of crab apple jelly that year. I counted the pots when I came back from Canon Roderick's. I wore my puce. So it was important that Jocelyn and the children should go to tea with Mrs. Jameson. Sarah gave Jocelyn's suit an extra pressing, and Ellen sewed new elastic in the children's sailor hats. So yeah, they get all gussied up and go to tea with Mrs. Jameson. So that's Felicity's, is it her aunt or her grandmother? Her relation, who she likes to come and stay with, which is pretty great. Yes, so Jocelyn does end up opening the bookshop. And I think Felicity knows about the story of Ferranti as well. We actually hear very early on, little plot point, that Mrs. Jameson bought up some old papers that were just like scattered around Ferranti's house, like newspapers and things, because she's going to use them to burn. But yeah, I like how they like plant that real early, and then Elizabeth Goudge comes back to it. During being a homeschool parent during the pandemic, there's definitely, yeah, Miss Lavender has to be a homeschooler. Homeschool teacher, but she does a great job in that scene there. I love this description about how, maybe we'll go back to it real quick. Where is that? I should have marked these things. But there's this, description of how, well, they hadn't had like a super intensive lesson, but actually they had both learned something that they needed to know. That it was a good lesson, in spite of the fact that it seemed like it was sort of haphazard. Let's see if we can find it. Have another sip of tea real quick before it gets cold. That's another thing about drinking tea, is it's like if you get busy reading a book or doing something and then you forget about it, then it's like it's too cold. It's like if you add a little bit more, that'll heat it up enough, but what if it needs more milk? That's why it feels like making a potion sometimes. It's like getting the temperature and the color just right, and the strength of the tea just right. My has gotten a little cold. I'm gonna top it up real quick. Oh, you know what? I forgot about the basket. Didn't I? I should take it out because it's probably fairly steeped now. We'll take out the thing so it doesn't get any more steeped. But yes, I do have, this still has some hot water in it, so I could just top it up a little bit more to make it hopefully the right amount of strength. And we haven't tried our speculoos biscuits yet either. Have a quick snack. I'm almost there. It's like I know it's within these couple pages. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, here we go. They had, as it happened, learned a great deal. The fact of resurrection had been brought home to them. Some facts about coal were now part of their mental equipment, like that way of describing it. And Henrietta had memorized some words of a great poem. It was the latter attainment that later turned out of great importance to them all. See, even what Hugh Anthony learned was like tied into the theme and tied into Henrietta's poem, because he was learning about how, buried forests turn into coal, and then that's burned, and even though it's the dead trees kind of have new life providing energy. So I like how that all ties in together. Let's see. It's like you always have to drink the tea when it's at the right temperature. I always hate it when I let good tea go to waste. Or like we were talking about microwaving water earlier, that I feel like it's not quite the same when it's microwaved. In the same way, once you've poured the tea and put the cream into it, you can microwave it to heat it back up if you forgot about it and it got cold, but I feel like it's just not quite as good. It's best when it's been freshly poured and the milk freshly put in it. These little biscuits are actually pretty good. I wonder how they achieve this. They must wrap the crepe when it's still warm, so it's still like malleable, and then just let it dry. It's very good. So one part of this book that is just a delight is the fact that it's a bookshop that Jocelyn opens in the little house in the marketplace. And, we get to hear all about them setting it up, like the books arriving, which room they set up as the library, which room they set up as the shop. And it's just so fun to hear how they're setting up the whole house, and everyone really gets involved. Like even I think Jocelyn's mom sends him fabric from Liberty, even though like she kind of disapproves, like because the family don't really want him to be a shopkeeper. Grandmother doesn't really want him to be a shopkeeper. But like Felicity is on hand, advising them as well. It won't do, Jocelyn, said Felicity. It simply won't do. The rug is lovely, but it clashes with the curtains, and the chairs are too modern. This is Jocelyn's like private study, not the bookshop that they're describing. You want period pieces in a house like this. Look how lovely your bedroom looks with the little four-poster and the old chest of drawers. You oughtn't to mix etchings with dreadful groups of mustached soldiers, and schoolboys don't look right on the paneling because he has his old photos up. They are my friends, Jocelyn told her gently, and it's my paneling. You know, Felicity, I care about beautiful things as much as you do, but everyone needs one room where they can heap up their past regardless of beauty. Every picture and stick and pipe in this room reminds me a bit of the past that I liked. One can relax in one's past. One hasn't got to do anything about it anymore. And it's companionable, too. It's so sweet. Yes, although there are times when Jocelyn is a little lonely in his house, but he adopts a dog. Mixed Biscuits is his name. I'm just realizing it's almost 5 o'clock already, and I haven't gotten very far into the plot, but that's okay. Usually I do about an hour for my live stream, so maybe we'll go over a little bit. In employing this method, she was not actuated by a study of child psychology, but by a desire for peace and quiet. I love Miss Lavender. Oh, someone from Hamburg, Germany. Hello. Mixed Biscuits sounds so cute. And it is pretty funny. You know, hey, we have mixed biscuits. Multiple kinds of biscuits to go with our tea. Yes. Yes. So yeah, we get to hear about them setting up the bookshop, and that's so delightful. There's this one scene where, you know, grandfather gives a little discourse on what the sort of calling of a bookshop keeper is. Let's see. Where is that part? I'm seeing other things, other passages I marked, but it's not the one I'm looking for. Yeah, I liked in this one scene, grandfather is helping them put away the books. And so he has Emily Bronte in one hand and Jane Austen in another. And he's like, and Elizabeth Goudge talks about how he'd forgotten Jane and Emily, but and like Felicity and Jocelyn tell the kids to like leave a place for Jane or leave a place for Emily. So fun. I'm not getting through the plot very quickly. There are too many lovely passages and quotes. Yeah, when Henrietta is sewing curtains for the house, like she's like determined to do them herself, but she keeps pricking her fingers. And so Felicity doesn't wash it, and when she gives it to Jocelyn, she's like, not everyone can say that a woman has bled for them. Because Henrietta kept pricking her fingers. Well, I might have to give up on that one, although I like these quotes. Had beauty always been for Ferranti an elusive flying thing? Had it never, in this lovely city, sat beside him at his own hearth and brought him peace? So Ferranti obviously appreciated beauty, but like he expected almost too much of it. Here's one passage of grandfather describing books. We're all greedy for life, you know, and our short span of existence can't give us all that we hunger for. The time is too short and our capacity not large enough. But in books, we experience all life vicariously. I like that. Yeah, some of the characters, especially like grandmother, and some of them don't quite approve of Ferranti. But this one quote, Jocelyn says, it's got nothing to do with you unless you happen to be attending his soul in a professional capacity. But, you know, like what his character was. What matters to you is what he gives you, not the flaws in a personality that has perhaps been cracked and strained by the effort of giving. Actually, he's not describing Ferranti. He's describing a poet, because it's the dean, another great character, and also one based on a dean that Elizabeth Goudge knew in real life. Apparently, when her father read the book, he was kind of mad at her because he's like, the dean's gonna recognize himself. I don't think he ever did, but that's funny that she obviously described him a little too accurately. But the dean is wondering if he should get a book of poetry for the choir children, and is saying that, should you, this poet's life wasn't all it should have been. But yeah, I love how Jocelyn talking about, the cracked and strained by the effort of giving, because sometimes that is the case. Authors maybe didn't have the best lives themselves, but they still have something to give you, even if you didn't agree with everything in their personal life. Their art can still be really rich. So we hear all about the festivals of the church. In November, we hear about St. Martin's Day, and we hear about, of course, Christmas and the after Christmas festivities. And there's a cool scene where they're decorating the tombs in the church, and fun to hear about all the different flowers they use, and just it feels like you're exploring the cathedral during this scene, because you get to go in all the little side chapels. But yeah, it's fun to hear about the residents of Torminster taking part in this work too, because of course they're bickering a bit. Lady Lavinia Umfreyville, the dean's wife, did not take any active part in the good work, for decorating tombs is a dusty business, and she bought her clothes in Paris and knew what was due to them. I feel like that's so funny, because I love to wear nice dresses, and I never want my outfit to stop me from doing something fun or stop me from doing something useful or helpful. But there are times when it's well, this dress is so nice. It's I have to respect it and make sure I don't get it dirty. So I like that. Her clothes were from Paris and she knew what was due to them. That's pretty great. Yes. And Henrietta, so Ferranti is an artist, we've heard about, Jocelyn talking about poetry, definitely the arts and what art means is a big theme in this book. And Henrietta herself, we hear some kind of foreshadowing that she is an artist herself, and one day she's going to be a painter. I wish Elizabeth Goudge had written a book about Henrietta when she was grown up, because we see little scenes, little vignettes of one day Henrietta would go on and do this, but she didn't actually write that book, so it's we only get the little scenes of it. But grandfather especially is very kind of fostering Henrietta's sense of artistry and her quirky ways. And he says he knew that she must discover by solitary experiment the way in which she herself could most easily learn to listen to the ditties of no tone that are piped to the spirit. She must learn to say, "Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on," and know that they would obey her. I think that's so fun that even that, as young as she is, she's already kind of developing her artistic sense and her finding her place in the world. There's a passage later that I think I posted in Discord that was about how she had to find kind of the balance between her own personality and the time and place in which God had placed her, which I think is really fun. I think there's a quote from Virginia Woolf about that too, I think, about how a writer's job is you have to find what you need to say within you, but also it has to match up with the time and place where you are, very practical in a way. Flowers in church are very important in British books. I know, another way to expose character foibles. Yeah, it is. I feel in British books, so often the flower arranging is a major task that people are engaged in. I guess it's kind of in Downton Abbey, isn't there a scene where the Lady Grantham, the wife of the current, I can't remember her name right now. The younger lady of the house has arranged a flower display, but then Lady Grantham, the old Lady Grantham, comes in and is this has to change. And she makes the maid help her redo it. But yeah, flower arranging, we always hear quite a lot about that. Let's see. So yes, we learn more and more about Ferranti. We mentioned those mysterious papers that Felicity's relative had salvaged, and Jocelyn realizes, what if there's something in there? So he goes and grabs the papers, and at first he thinks, oh, it's just old newspaper, but then it turns out there is a manuscript that Ferranti has left behind, and so Jocelyn just sweats over it, trying to make it work, and because I guess there are some pieces missing, so he actually writes some of the pieces in himself to kind of fill in the gaps, and it just sounds like so strenuous. It reminds me a little bit of I read a book, I think Ancestors Brocades, about Emily Dickinson, the poet, because when her poems were first published, they had been kind of tidied up and cleaned up, and then of course later they were republished in their original form. I like that, though. I feel like that's kind of what Jocelyn is doing, although I think Jocelyn does a little bit of a better job, and a different job, because it's a long play that he writes rather than individual poems. But it's he's helping the world to understand Ferranti, because Ferranti as an artist is a little bit ununderstandable. He's too opaque. So Jocelyn is kind of acting as the mediator. In fact, the metaphor they use is he's the Horatio to Ferranti's Hamlet, trying to get this play out. You match the teapot. It is an accident. I didn't realize. That's so funny, though. Yeah, I was gonna tell you guys where I got things. Where did I get this? This is just, I'm sure you find it on Amazon. I'm pretty sure I got this one on Amazon. But this is a specialty teacup. It's from the El Tovar at the Grand Canyon. Is a cool old hotel, and Mary Coulter was the designer of it. I mentioned her in, I recently posted some throwback travel vlogs from the Grand Canyon, and you can buy these. They were at the hotel in the dining room, but then when we got home, I looked them up, and the brand is, don't want to drip, it's dripping. Ancient Memembro. So Native American Indian design, but the railway, Santa Fe dining car service. Yeah, you can get it from their website, which is pretty awesome. So my my little not tea strainer, milk container and teacup. Unfortunately, the only teapot they had was very small. This I just found at a shop. It reminds me of a cinnamon bun, but it's pretty great. Yes, as fun that I love that you could buy this. I only wish they had a bigger, nicer teapot, because I feel like that would kind of complete the set. But this Memembro, isn't that, or is it called HF Coors? I feel like that's the name of it too, because I think I'm on their email list, and I get I get things from them every now and then. But they have all these cool sort of southwestern designs. Trying not to let my tea get too cold where it's undrinkable. Yes, I really like all the different kind of stages of the plot in A City of Bells, because it does unfold fairly slowly. And you get these kind of these great sort of surprises, but just every now and again, at first Jocelyn feels like he's connected to Ferranti and doesn't really know how or what he's called to do, but then he thinks to check those papers, and he finds the manuscript, so then he can work away on that. And I love when he's finished with it, he talks about how he thinks it was just kind of rubbish, no good. It took him forever, but sometimes you feel that way, when I'm working on some project or editing a video, that it's taken me all week, and at the end you're just I'm sick of this. I hate it. It's awful. It wasn't even worth it. But then later you go back and you watch it, and you're this was pretty good. But at the time, you can get just so sick of some artistic, some creation that you're working on. Oh shoot, I was on a page that I was going to read, and then it disappeared. why did it do that? It was just, I liked, it was during the Christmas service that Jocelyn is kind of noticing how the other people in his group are praying or thinking, like, Hugh Anthony has a new whistle and is trying to decide at what point to blow it to interrupt the service. But Henrietta is like caught up in the beauty of the cathedral, and grandmother has a much more kind of practical outlook. Let's see. So, like, he describes grandmother's faith. She was too practical, of necessity too concerned with the details of daily living, to be romantic in her religion like Henrietta, or quixotic like grandfather. But her faith was the strength of her strong-minded life. As she sat there, she was in that state of detachment and tranquil concentration that brings one mind very near to another. And Jocelyn could distinctly feel her sober certainty reaching him through Henrietta's stars and wings, as though what she and her like believed was the thread strung through the lovely bead of things that Henrietta and her like imagined, giving them form and value. During the dean's sermon, Jocelyn's thoughts wandered, for the dean's remarks never brought conviction to skeptical minds. Yet today he was almost persuaded by the silence of others, grandfather, grandmother, Henrietta, and the small, thin bishop who sat opposite him on his throne. It struck him as he meditated that if these four, whom he held to be his superiors, were believers, then their belief was more likely to be true than his own unbelief. The bishop, a distinguished scholar with a mind far more able to test and probe than his, grandfather with his artist's perceptiveness, grandmother with her everyday common sense, and Henrietta sensitive and romantic, playing so happily with the toys of religion and finding reality through them, had arrived through their different avenues of approach at the same place. And who was he in the face of their evidence to say that that place did not exist? Just love that appreciation of all the different kind of avenues of faith. So good. So yes, Felicity, we did mention, Felicity Summers is actually a famous actress. And so she is determined to get the play acted and get it performed. And there was one line that was, grass might grow in other places, but it never grew underneath Felicity's feet. So she really like goes after it. There's a really funny scene where she goes to get money from the dean. I know we haven't mentioned the dean a lot, but you've probably been able to tell that he's a little bit, kind of obsessed with appearances, very full of his own importance. But like Felicity gets kind of all dolled up to see him because she's gonna have to ask for money. And the description of her outfit was so fabulous, like that her cloak was black like the dawn on the outside. No, black like night on the outside and pink like the dawn on the inside. And the butler, who, when she rings the doorbell, at first the butler is like kind of imposing, like, who are you? Why are you calling this late at night? But then she sweeps in, and when the butler sees her cloak, he's like, respects her. He's like, that must have cost a pretty penny. So she goes to see the dean, and at first the dean thinks she's asking for spiritual advice. And people don't usually come to him for spiritual advice because he doesn't give very good advice, at least in his sermons. But Felicity kind of sees this and realizes this, and so she kind of readjusts her strategy where she's like, can ask him for help without like offending him. But I thought that was sweet too, like kind of this moment of like vulnerability, like where the dean, even though he puts on this outward, he obviously is a very confident person, but it's like even inwardly he also like has uncertainties and like wishes maybe that he was a better dean than he is. So yes, Felicity gets the money and manages to get the play acted, and there's a little girl in the play, and it turns out that Henrietta is kind of roped into performing the part of the little girl, and she does it beautifully. I love the way we're given like kind of a overview of the play. It's like the second book within a book. It's such a great kind of storyline, and Jocelyn feels like it's probably kind of the story of Ferranti's life, because in the story, this minstrel is looking for beauty, and first he thinks he can find it in nature, and then he thinks he can find it in, like, man's created art, and then he falls in love, and he thinks he can find it with this woman, and then but he then abandons the woman, and so then he's kind of in despair, but he has this vision where he learns that beauty is not one particular thing, but it's this overarching pattern of things. And in this life, we only get glimpses of the patterns. But one day, kind of the veil will be lifted, and we'll be able to see the whole splendor that, like, we can't even really perceive right now, with our sort of limited vision. But yeah, I feel like that ties in so beautifully to the rest of the theme of, like, kind of the artistry, and the writers and the artists in this book are really great. Let's see. So the play is performed. Felicity and Jocelyn are hoping that Ferranti will arrive during, or not hoping, but thinking that he might, because he'll see that his play is being put on. Although part of what they use to bill it is that Ferranti is dead, like that they say that he is, and Jocelyn writes a bunch of newspaper articles about how he was a brilliant writer but not appreciated during his life, and they kind of use that as part of their marketing shtick. But they also kind of wonder, like, is he alive? Maybe he'll show up. He doesn't seem to show up. But then Jocelyn has this feeling that he is alive. Like, it's about how Jocelyn has this connection to Ferranti, and it's like they have so many conversations when they haven't met. And so he feels that on the first night of the play, he gets this feeling like he's watching the play through Ferranti's eyes. And he thinks that Ferranti probably has come to see the play, even though he hasn't made himself known. So Jocelyn doesn't tell anyone where he's going, because he doesn't want to get anyone's hopes up, because grandfather and Henrietta also were good friends with Ferranti and are hoping he's still alive. And it's such a sort of vague thing, like, oh, I felt his presence, So he goes back to London, and he just watches the play every night, hoping that he'll run into Ferranti. And then on the last night, when he's about to give up, he has this feeling, that the same feeling he got on the first night, that he's watching it through the eyes of Ferranti. And so he, leaves the play and kind of is just swept along with the tide of people leaving the theater. And that he didn't find Ferranti, but then he does run into somebody out on the bridge, and I think it's a dark and stormy night. It's a rainy night, and this stranger, I think, kind of stomped on his leg by accident. Of course, he had a game leg, so he invites him inside to escape the rain. And it turns out that is Ferranti, and so we finally get to meet him. And he hasn't died, and but that is kind of his story, that he's feeling just done with life, and he's looked for beauty in all these places, and he feels this regret for having abandoned his wife and abandoned his daughter, which I feel like you could already guess. Although then again, I've reread this book so many times, I can't remember if I had guessed the first time. I'd be interested to hear, you guys, those of you who read it, if you guessed before you found out that Henrietta was Ferranti's daughter. Because now I feel I see the clues towards it every time, but I probably was surprised the first time I read it. I should have written that down, because now I can't remember. Maybe I'm trying to remember if I read this book for the first time and talked about it in a YouTube video, or if I was rereading it. Can't remember when I first read this book. Anyway, Jocelyn puts these things together. He doesn't tell Ferranti right away that Henrietta is his daughter, but he is the one who realizes that Ferranti, is Henrietta's father, and so obviously he hopes that he can be at least part of Henrietta's life. Although Jocelyn has decided by this point that he's going to adopt Henrietta and Hugh Anthony or at least when grandfather and grandmother pass away, he's going to, care for them and bring them up, which is what grandfather mentioned at the very beginning, that hoping that Jocelyn would feel guided to do that. So yes, oddly enough, the Ferranti doesn't come with him back to Torminster, even though Jocelyn would like him to come back. They have this really cool kind of conversation about, the way the play ends is that the minstrel can't get back kind of into life. He's gone too far into despair. And Ferranti kind of feels that way too. And Jocelyn is talking about how, well, it is possible to be reborn, like to kind of come back into life even when you've been feeling despairing. And that, I think, is totally a theme in Elizabeth Goudge, is rebirth and resurrection. Even at the very beginning, Miss Lavender, when Henrietta was reading the poem and Hugh Anthony was talking about coal, that like rebirth is always possible. "I cannot get back," quoted Jocelyn. "The minstrel in Ferranti's play was mistaken, for it is possible to be born again as a little child. Many men and women have been, though I grant you, they have been the greatest of us. The minstrel made the mistake of choosing death rather than birth. It is easier, of course. Easier? The dying man, though he may suffer, only has to let go, while the child in the womb has to fight for its life." So, so Jocelyn was trying to convince him to, don't give up, fight for your life, which I do feel like is so true. I think sometimes people act like joy or happiness can be like trivial, like, oh, you only feel that way because you haven't been truly through misery, like you're just lucky, you haven't been through anything difficult enough to kind of take away your happiness. But Elizabeth Goudge definitely shows how, well, actually real joy is when you have been through misery, but you choose not to give up on joy. It's a choice. It's a fight. Like, you're fighting for your life. You're fighting to come back alive. And you're choosing to be reborn and to continue to hope and continue to kind of give it your all. So we are nearing the end. With Jocelyn and Felicity's romance, Ferranti has always kind of been this ghost between them. But once they find him, and once he comes back, Jocelyn feels like now there's nothing between them, and he goes and rushes over and proposes to Felicity, which is so sweet. And then I almost wish that was a little longer though, because we've been waiting for it so long that like it was just so quick at the end of the book. And then he goes and tells grandfather that Ferranti's back, and so Henrietta rushes over to see Ferranti. And I think he does. At that point, he knows that Henrietta is his daughter. And it's fun. Where was it? It's another of those kind of flash forwards where we hear what Henrietta's future will be like. Let's see. He thought now, looking at her upturned, glowing face, that one day he would take her to Venice and watch her eyes widen in wonder, and to Athens and see her glow in delight, and to cities of France and Belgium where the bells would ring as they rang at Torminster. They would wander over the world together, and life would be sweet. Henrietta, gazing at him in adoration, he had done nothing whatsoever to deserve, half shy and half eager, did not know yet that he was her father. She only knew that the Pied Piper had come back. He was a magic man, a fairy tale man, and it seemed to her quite natural that he should have got lost, for fairy tale people are always easily mislaid. But warm inside her was the certainty that now at last he was found for good. So they're just so sweet. I just love the whole story, and the characters are so warm and so vividly drawn, and we do get to see through each of their eyes. I know my mom with Elizabeth Goudge sometimes finds it a little disjointed, the way we switch perspectives so frequently. Because it's not like it's just told from Henrietta's or just Jocelyn's or just Felicity's. It really kind of is, jumps into each different person's mind. And I like that. But yeah, stylistically, it is, it's not, one continuous narrative point of view. But you do get to know the characters so much better that way, and really kind of, get under their skin and see what makes them tick. So thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. I did guess. Yeah, I think it was well set up. It's hard whenever I'm reading a book, I always think, how hard it is to set things up where it's like you have to give enough clues to know what's coming, but it's like you don't want to give so many clues that you make it obvious what's coming. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming. Obi-Wan Ferranti. I like that. That's pretty great. They are connected through the forest. Totally. It's a well, no, it's not quite the Ren and Kylo connection because they don't see each other, but it is connected. They could totally be Jedi. I can see that. Yes, I'm just trying to scroll back up to see if I missed any comments. Yeah, I do like Elizabeth Goudge's mysteries. I think they're really great. I really liked, I read Smoky House recently, which was a book for children, and there was a really fun mystery component to that, which I did not exactly see coming. I guessed it would turn out differently, but I liked the way that turned out. Yes. Well, yeah, I hope everyone has a lovely weekend, had a lovely weekend. Now we're heading back into the week. And yes, let's see, I can't remember what my plan for this Friday's video is. I can't believe we're already moving along through May, though. I filmed some segments for my May reading vlog the other day because I was realizing we're already halfway through May. Like, I should make sure I'm filming some things. Jules' father in Cloud City. So yes, May reading vlog is coming up. I think this Friday I was planning to do another Disney. I still have a couple, some footage that I haven't yet edited and uploaded. So I think that's going to be this Friday. So that should be fun. But yes, thank you guys for joining. Hopefully you now know how to make tea, or how I like to make tea. Maybe you found a tip that you can try the next time you brew a pot. It's definitely worth, I think it's definitely worth having a real teapot, and not just, the mud, but having the teapot and the teacup enhances the enjoyment of the tea. And yeah, if you have not yet read A City of Bells, if you weren't able to get your hands on it, it's definitely worth the effort of tracking it down, because there are some reasonably priced used copies on like ABE books. You just have to be careful because I think there are also some like very expensive, more collector's edition copies, but like the paperbacks aren't too bad. So, all right. Well, I'm going to log off now, but thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Bye.